Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second series of our Global In-Market webinars, with this webinar focused on the Japan market. I'm Ashley Ridley from State Promotions, Department for Trade and Investment, and I'll be your host this morning. As with the last webinar series, we will hear from South Australia's expert overseas representative. Following this update, we'll be joined by Food SA's Chief Executive Officer, Catherine Sayer, and her in-country food and beverage representative, Mr. Tim Tanaka, for a question and answer session. Just a couple of logistical items before we get started. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to the department's website. At any time during the webinar, you can ask questions through the Q&A section on the right-hand side of your screen. However, please ensure your question is directed to all panelists rather than to one specific person. This ensures our moderators can see the questions. If we run out of time, we'll include any unanswered questions and the answers onto our website. And lastly, we will have a 10-second poll pop up at the end of the webinar. Please do take the time to complete this for us to continually improve our communications to you. I'd now like to introduce you to Sally Townsend, South Australia's Commissioner for Japan and Korea, who is based in Tokyo. Welcome, Sally.
Hi Ash, thank you very much for your introduction and good morning everyone. My name's Sally Townsend and I'm your state representative based in Tokyo, Japan. Thank you very much for joining this second update on Japan and how we're dealing with COVID-19 over here. I'm going to give you a snapshot of what we've seen over the past week, what the new issues are now, what we're seeing in the market, and if there have been any changes since the government's implementation of stricter measures regarding social and workplace interaction and business practices. So what's the current mood in Japan? We're in a state of emergency at the moment, and we've seen the introduction of the 3C criteria to flatten the COVID-19 curve, and that's avoid closed spaces, crowded places, and close contact settings, which is a bit tricky when we're living cheek by jowl in Tokyo. So on Tuesday night, Prime Minister Abe declared a month-long state of emergency in Tokyo and 6 other prefectures, including Osaka, and that represents about half the nation's economy. So what does state of emergency actually mean? It sounds much more severe than it actually is over here. There have been a number of measures that businesses and the general public have been asked to comply with. However, they carry no penalties for non-compliance, unlike steps taken by Australia, for example. However, most businesses are doing what they've been asked to do. We are reminded by public announcements 4 times a day to refrain from going outside. And the Tokyo governor is doing daily updates on the situation on social media in both Japanese and English. So what are these measures? At first there was a lot of confusion as the municipal and central governments argued over which industries to target for temporary closures. But so far in Tokyo we've seen universities, cinemas, live music venues, nightclubs and internet cafes. They've been asked to suspend operations. Restaurants and Japanese-style izakaya pubs in Tokyo will be requested to shut by 8 p.m. each day and to stop serving alcohol by 7 p.m, which is going to be a big change considering that these izakayas are usually open till 2 or 3 in the morning. Schools, daycare centres and welfare services will be requested to halt activities depending on circumstances too. And that means apologies in advance if you hear any childlike noises in the background today. A third group comprising medical institutions, financial services, supermarkets, convenience stores, hotels and public transport providers can continue operations as long as they take countermeasures against the virus. Many large department stores have been hit really hard and they've decided to open at all except for their food hall areas. The Metropolitan Government is offering subsidies to smaller business operators that accept its suspension requirements, and they're also offering low interest business loans to SMEs that have been affected by COVID and these measures. So which section is this affecting the most? Obviously the F&B sector. So Japan's food and beverage industry has sustained significant losses as consumers refrain from going out, no tourism and so on, and will do even more so now. A recent survey of more than 4,000 restaurants conducted by Table Check revealed that the average daily number of reservations had fallen by about 40% on the year. So what are they doing? How are they adapting? They're closing or they're starting takeout and delivery. And it is said that about 40% of restaurants will probably close for good due to the effects of COVID-19. However, many restaurants that have the capacity, from large group operated chains to Michelin-starred French restaurants, are offering takeout and home delivery services. So some are teaming up with their wine and food suppliers to collaborate on complete course catering. They're doing frozen meals or maybe box sets of ingredients that the restaurant would normally use themselves. They're using Instagram and Facebook to advertise, and some groups have been created by regular patrons. They've sprung up to spread the word that their favourite restaurants are doing it tough and need support. So how does this affect on-premise wine sales? Up until now, wine, for example, or in a restaurant has had to be consumed then and there, but the government has decided to allow the sales of alcoholic drinks for takeout and delivery by restaurants and bars. So in line with that decision, the National Tax Agency has introduced a 6-month alcohol sales licence, and alcoholic drinks covered by the new licence are those already in inventories or procured from the existing suppliers of each restaurant and bar. So what does this all mean for importers of South Australian alcoholic beverages, wine, in market? So this obviously varies greatly depending on whether the import sales are concentrated on premise or off-premise. On-premise sales have greatly decreased, but off-premise sales are still chugging along. So those with a B2C network are seeing wine move that way. We're seeing wine move in wine shops, bottle shops, supermarkets, and even Power Systems, which is a grocery delivery service here, have seen wine sales increase over the past 2 weeks. But just bear in mind, these are not premium wines. These are wines under $15 a bottle or so. So some importers that set up a direct sales network after the global financial crisis, they're seeing a lot of wine move that way, which is good news. Importers are also teaming up with complementary food producers and leveraging each other's networks. For example, domestic boutique cheese producers are teaming up with wine importers to leverage each other's networks and sell packs already made. Wine is selling online on Rakuten and Amazon, but people are buying cheap sets, 6 or 12 bottles for around $100. So are we seeing in retail? Retail consumers are becoming increasingly sensitive to nutrition and immunity issues, and this is creating opportunities for some specific products. Honey, for example, affordable, shelf-stable, ideal for storing. For example, a recent TV program highlighted the health benefits of butter and honey, not in relation to a specific product or brand, and also not stating that these cure COVID-19, but just referring to an improved immune system. And this led to a large and immediate sales of honey. Ecommerce food staples as well as fresh food, the supermarket chains have grown exponentially. And while government assures consumers that supply chains are sound and any shortages will only be temporary, some supermarkets have been overwhelmed by demand and have temporarily halted internet sales. Convenience stores are more convenient than ever. They've introduced a greater selection of private brand frozen meals, 7-Eleven premium appetizers, for example, stuff that you'd order in a bar are on sale and have experienced a 30% growth in the past 2 weeks. And also RTDs, ready to drink, drinks in a can, very low price, high alcohol content canned drinks are selling very well. So you can buy a 9% alcohol whiskey highball in a can for about $2.50. So some good news with April 1st and tariff cuts. So April 1st is the start of the new financial year in Japan, and this also means the implementation of a 7th round of the JPA tariff cuts on product lines under JPA. JPA, that's the Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement, and also under the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Japan will have implemented the 3rd round of tariff cuts on April the 1st too. So there's a portal, the FTA portal, ftaportal.dfat.gov.au, and this is a free and easy to use website that helps Australian businesses decide which of the 2 agreements offer greater tariff cuts for their particular exports. And one initiative currently underway is the new $110 million fund announced on 1st of April by Federal Trade, Tourism and Investment Minister Simon Birmingham. And this fund will support Australia's agriculture and fishery by helping them export their high quality produce into key overseas markets. So with return flights will be bringing back medical supplies, medicines and equipment. So this initiative is aimed at restoring key freight routes for our farmers until commercial capacity can be restored again. So if you are in market or you want to know more about these agreements or see an opportunity, I think the best way to start is to work with your TradeStar export advisor in South Australia. So these guys are regularly in contact with us here in Japan and Austrade and Food SA too, and they really are vital in keeping the connections going. They can help with providing advice, and particularly when situations are changing almost daily, sensible advice, and they get in contact with us often. I really recommend you utilising these people. Also, to reiterate from last week, if you're in market, it's really important to keep in contact with your importer or customer. Stay in close contact with them, find out what their issues are, let them know how you're going, and keep each other up to date. This is very important. And if you can't get in touch with them, or if you need our help, please shout out. So Tim Tanaka, the Food SA representative in Japan, he works very closely with us too. He'll be giving a more comprehensive briefing in a Q&A session with Catherine Sayer, CEO of Food SA. But I welcome any questions that you may have, and if I can't answer them now, they'll be up on the DTI website in a day or two. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sally. That was a great overview. A couple of questions have come in for you. So the first one is, are shopping centres still open in Japan? And how has this crisis affected retail stores, the cosmetic industry, etc.?
Shopping centres, a lot of shopping centres have closed or they're operating on reduced hours. So cosmetics are not moving in shopping centres at all, but they are online. So big cosmetic companies, Shiseido, Jurlique, companies like that are using social media and also their membership network service to send out regular updates and keep sales moving online. But that's where we're seeing all the sales at the moment. Shopping centres, if they're not closed, very, very reduced hours.
Okay, well, that's great. Secondly, you mentioned that e-commerce is doing well right now. What kind of products besides daily essentials are selling online?
Daily essentials is probably the most of what's being sold online. Also bicycles. people are not using public transport. They're trying to avoid it as much as possible. So bicycles are selling well, but exercise equipment, that kind of thing, really stuff that you can do in your house, games, stuff that you don't need outside besides a bicycle, of course, but nothing, no luxury items, really what you can use now, not in the future.
Great answer, thank you. And lastly, just a reminder that the question and answer box is available for you to submit any questions. We do have one more that's currently posted. How will government agencies help redevelop and reform relationships with our clients? I'm not sure if that's from the Japan side or South Australian side, but how will government agencies help redevelop?
Well, we work really closely, as I mentioned before, with TradeStart, with Austrade, with Food SA, with our colleagues at DTI. And this connection is really, really important because we keep in touch with each other, and we, on behalf of the exporters in South Australia, we're still keeping in touch with the customers and importers on our side. So what we've done is we have sent out a survey to a number of importers here in Japan just to hear their thoughts, what's going on. We keep in touch with them, and I think that's really, really important. As I talked about before, it's important for the exporter to do so, but we're also doing so on behalf of the exporters as well.
Just hold it there for a moment, Sally. We're having we're experiencing a bit of technical difficulties with your audio. Can you hear us, Sally?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Sorry, now we can. You just dropped out there for a moment, so you might just want to repeat that last little bit. Apologies there.
Oh, no problem. So we are keeping in close contact with importers of South Australian products and businesses that do business with South Australian companies. So on behalf of companies in South Australia as well. So we're also working very, very closely with TradeStart, Food SA and Austrade, giving information, just even connected, say, how's it going? I think that's really, really important right now. Help in the long run when things are back to normal.
That's great. That communication is really important. A question has come through from Darren Mason. How are imports affected? Delays with shipping, clearance, importing warehouses and distribution, for instance.
Yeah, there have been a number of delays, and there will be so, unfortunately, for the long term. I believe Tim will probably know a little bit more about that than I do in the food and bev sector, but there really have been a number of delays. Obviously, flights are not moving along, and there has been a bottleneck. A lot of freight has been moved to Narita Airport, so there's a bit of a bottleneck there, but hopefully that will move soon.
Okay, that's fabulous. So we'll just hold it for there for the moment. That's covered the questions for the moment. We'll continue, please continue submitting questions, and I'll raise with the parties after part 2 of the webinar. So it's actually my pleasure now to introduce you to Food SA's Chief Executive Officer, Catherine Saher, and her in-country food and beverage representative, Tim Tanaka, for their question and answer session. So welcome, Catherine and Tim.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and good morning. Very sunny, beautiful day here in Adelaide, probably not so much over in Japan. So Thank you for the introduction. And can I also now introduce Tim Tanaka, who is, Sally mentioned, our in-market representative for Food South Australia. And Tim has been with Food SA for well over 15 years, actually, and very experienced in food and beverage. So, Sally, thanks for your insights. And Tim, could you just give, now that we're talking specifically food and beverage, could you tell us what's happening in the food and beverage sector in Japan since COVID-19 appeared?
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Yes, prior to the federal government announcing a state of emergency, consumers were forecasting the possibility of lockdown. So demand for instant noodles, soups, frozen vegetables, and pasta, microwavable foodstuffs has been constant in recent weeks. Fresh vegetable, meat, bread are selling as usual. In the fruit section, especially bananas and apples are in high demand, which is as a result of school children being home. Schools have been closed since the beginning of March and will continue to stay closed until May 6 in 7 different areas. A government survey named City Watch Survey, which is survey taxi drivers, restaurants, bar owners, hotels, and supermarket buyers nationally for the purpose of insight on the outlook for business climate in the near future. The March results indicate business experienced a huge blow, even more than the economic damage of financial crisis and the earthquake of 2011. Sharp decline is especially noticeable in food service and tourism sectors.
Thanks, Tim. So just looking specifically at retail, what are some of your observations from a retail perspective?
Based on Japan Supermarket Association data and discussion with supermarket buyers, and supermarket sales are steady. There is no major increase in the number of customers. However, average expenditure per customer is higher than usual. Most likely because people are buying more foods per visit. Ion Group supermarket buyers say that March sales for food were around 110% nationally and 115% in Tokyo and major cities compared to the same months in 2019. However, the seafood sector has been hit hard with less sales, probably because producers have a short shelf life. For the month of March, at the Tokyo Fish Market, the total auction seafood volume was 7% less compared to a year earlier. The total auction value was 12% less, especially in the tuna category was. Average auction price per kilogram was JPY 906. That's a 12.4% drop on the year before. Total tuna auction value in March was 16%, which is one of the biggest declines. So from importers and distributors' point of view, stock movement of premium seafood like crabs, abalone, and bluefin tuna has been extremely slow following the lack of business in the food service industry.
Which leads into the next question, Tim. What about food service? Your observations there?
Sales at fast food chains such as hamburger, beef and rice bowl, and noodle shops are steady because they have takeaway services. Sales for home delivery pizza chains has not declined much either. It's the dining in restaurants, hotel that's suffering the most. Number of overseas tourists in February was down close to 60% to 1.3 million and the March and April figures are expected to be even less. Based on the government data, overseas tourists spend around $4 billion per month this time of the year, and of that figure, around 20% represent food and drinks. These potential sales suddenly disappeared. Hotels and restaurants that rely heavily on overseas tourists are already fighting to get through the current situation. In Japan, lemon consumption in the food service sector is 70% of supply, mostly used in food presentation and alcoholic drinks. This time last year, weekly stock movement in the Tokyo area was 45,000 cartons per week. The current weekly dispatch from warehouses is 18 to 20,000 cartons, which reflects how demand in the food industry has shrunk in very short time. The situation only worsens at the Golden Week holiday, which starts in the end of April, one of the prime sales-making periods in Japan, as vendors foreseeing sales as very grim due to the situation in place to keep people at home until May 6.
Thanks, Tim. So, and Sally did briefly touch on this, but what do you see as some of the current issues around the importing of food and beverages into Japan, around freight, logistics, customs, etc.?
Yes, as Sally mentioned, that air freight, of course, no flights available to Japan at the moment, but sea freight arrival is mostly on time. Shipping is no major issues. No major issues for distributing in Japan as well. Trucking, the distributing is no problem. Customs clearance and quarantine procedures, as usual, takes normal times.
That's good to hear. Great. Are you seeing any changes in consumer purchasing and consumption patterns?
Yes, frozen foods and long shelf life products have the upper hand. Long shelf life products such as frozen, canned, or pre-cooked products are in demand as families need to provide lunch for their children who are usually served lunch at school.
And what about any emerging opportunities? What are you seeing around that?
It is, as Sally mentioned, that it's quick and easy food as well as health-conscious foods to boost immunity and to maintain general good health. The stock movement of all fruits except lemons has been good. Harvest of mandarin has just started SA, so demand from importers for oranges is very high at the moment.
Well, that's good to hear, because it's a very big market for South Australian citrus, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah.
So if you start to think about recovery and moving forward, what can businesses be doing now, looking forward to things improving?
It wouldn't be good timing for trying to start new business or introduce new products, as not everyone's working at the office and many companies are avoiding meetings in person. That aside, some buyers are keen to visit South Australia, such as seafood and fresh produce buyers who make a visit during the year to check produce on site and directly meet with suppliers for discussion. Right now, making trip to South Australia is out of the question. Therefore, it is crucial for suppliers to communicate closely with customers to give updates ahead of exporting.
Right. Thanks for that update, Tim. Actually, I think we pass back to you.
You certainly do. Thanks, Catherine, and thanks, Tim. That was fabulous. Really appreciate having online today. Just want to remind everyone to please do take the time to complete the short poll that's coming up on screen shortly. This helps us tremendously. And lastly, if you can join us tomorrow at 11:30 for the Malaysia update with a special guest presentation from Austrade. That's on at 11:30 tomorrow. That would be fabulous. Just checking there, no, there wasn't any further questions at this point, although I just did have one myself, Catherine and Tim. China has WeChat. I'm just wondering what kind of social media platforms are being used to sell or promote products in Japan, or is it all platforms like Amazon? I think you did touch on a couple of things here, but just curious as to whether we have something as strong as WeChat.
I'll let Tim answer that one.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with the social media stuff, but is people using the Instagram or FaceTime? Not FaceTime, the Facebook for the promoting the products or some campaigns. But yeah, that's how I can think of it.
Okay,
yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I just curious as to, as I said, WeChat is so strong in China, whether there was something sort of similar that we could be communicating with to our partners and friends in Japan. So that's good to know. Well, that comes to a close of our session. So again, thank you, Sally, Catherine and Tim, and everyone that's joined us today. I hope you've gained a good insight into the Japan market, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.